One Question is brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996. Today on One Question is Jeremy Sharpe from the University of Arizona. He's the Associate AD for Communication Services. And I pinged Jeremy last week, and I like this idea of talking about what goes on a little bit from a preparation standpoint behind the scenes during an athletic director search, but more so for the announcement of the new AD. Of course, David Hickey is the new AD at Arizona. We'll start in about a month. But Jeremy, let's start a little bit with when you guys knew Greg was going to exit for Alabama, what were the items on your punch list, if you will, that you knew you kind of wanted to get ready from a formal structure standpoint? So you would just at some point have to plug in a name and get ready to go with the announcement and what needs to happen front facing once you have a new AD. What were some of those initial things that went through your head that you started to prepare?
Well, fortunately, a lot of the folks that are in administration here at Arizona were here during the transition to Greg Byrne in 2010. So we took kind of the AD intro plan that they had utilized back then, and we had a good starting point with kind of what we wanted to address, what things needed to happen, who needed to be involved, and how we wanted to approach it. So we took that plan and tweaked it to modernize it for use with some things that have occurred over the last 7 years and made the necessary changes, and got to a point where those that needed to be involved in the entire process were aware of the document, were aware of edits and changes that we made throughout the kind of 6 weeks leading up to the announcement of Dave. And so we really started out at an organized point. That was helpful. We didn't have to create anything. We just needed to adjust. And then the second thing was working with our counterparts on campus. Obviously, when the president is involved in making a decision of this nature, we'll take a lot of cues from campus, and we have a great working relationship with our communications folks on campus. So we spend a lot of time working with them. We understand their process, and they understand ours. And so by being in communication and kind of having those two elements checked off relatively early after Greg's announcement, I think I felt really comfortable about where we were and what we wanted to accomplish and how everything would come together when we got down to crunch time and got down to finalists and then potentially an announcement.
And when you're on the inside of a search like this, and I would say, and I'm kind of thinking as I'm talking here, it was one of the more truly confidential searches, at least at the Power 5 level in the last couple of years. I mean, Cedric Dempsey and Rocky LaRose, very tight-lipped about things, as expected, and there were media members in your marketplace who cover you guys who said that would be the case. But when you're on the inside, how much of the determination of who it ends up being, does that matter to how it is presented on the front end once there's an announcement?
It didn't, as far as I knew, because kind of like you mentioned earlier, we could go ahead, short of writing a release, because you don't know who the person's going to be, you can get all of these ancillary things you want to get taken care of. So we had a full schedule that we put together that dealt with both the announcement and then what we wanted to do surrounding his introductory press conference. So the who wasn't necessarily as important as the how. And so once we got the name from Rocky, I was able to go to work on the release, gathering elements like a headshot, be able to get graphics created, enlist our photography department, our videography department to prepare for his trip to Tucson and his announcement, which we could have done regardless of who was selected. So the who wasn't as important as nailing down the how and being able to check off everything that we wanted to accomplish. The good thing for us is, and I'm sure there's a number of athletics departments around the country that have this advantage if they choose to use it, but when you have two previous sitting ADs in town available and still with the connections that they maintain from their combined 70-something years in college athletics, you have an advantage when you get into a search like this because our president can put her trust in that group along with key donors and some other people that are important in choosing your next athletics director. And you don't necessarily have to concern yourselves with outside entities coming into your process. So both Said and Rocky were very aware of what Dr. Hart was looking for and the process with which she wanted to go about doing it. And because we're so familiar then with both Said and Rocky, it made us comfortable to know that they would go about the search, and when things were happening that were important for us to know, we would be aware of it. And really nobody in the department would be blindsided by an announcement or a leak or something along those lines. So the confidentiality really helped from that standpoint. Because then when you get down to the selection and actually putting your process into motion, you feel like you're the ones that are kind of driving that narrative. And then obviously when it gets to the point where outside entities, trustees and donors and folks of that nature, you can anticipate in this day and age that there'll be a leak. So when it came, the leak, which was originally reported in the Detroit newspaper, we were on the verge of finalizing everything to announce that day anyway. So we were in good shape. I think everybody felt comfortable, and it gave us a chance to really control the narrative of the announcement.
And interestingly enough, that leak and your all subsequent announcement came on a Saturday, which maybe is a little abnormal. Was there any discussion about the timing of that as a specific day?
Well, if we had our druthers, we would have loved to have held it for a Monday announcement for two reasons. One, I think, in the process of hiring an AD, there's a lot of people that have to check the boxes, and certainly the Board of Regents is one of them. So we didn't want to get too far out in front of ourselves until the appropriate people were notified and the procedural stuff was going through. The other reason was we were playing UCLA on a nationally televised game and hosting game day that morning. So there was a little bit of conversation where, hey, we have the national spotlight in Tucson. Do we want to get this announced and get it involved in that broadcast? Or is it more important to make sure that those boxes are checked and the appropriate people have kind of either given sign-off or prepared to give sign-off on the hiring? And it just so happened that because the timetable got moved up a little bit that morning, before there was any thought that there would be leaks or a report, the folks on campus, we consulted together and said, you know what, let's finalize everything and let's go ahead and make the announcement today, which ended up working out really well. I think the UCLA Arizona men's basketball game was the highest rated on ESPN in a given time period, whether it's this season or over the last couple of seasons. We were able to get the information on Dave to the broadcasters and get some of that information out during the broadcast.
Yeah, I forgot that it was the same day as that game as well. So walk me through that Saturday for you with the anticipation that something may come out, and you're starting to get all the boxes checked on the back end. When something finally hits from, I think it was Mark Snyder at the Detroit Free Press, when you all finally see that, is that an oh shit moment, or is that, okay, we know what we're doing here, we know what's coming?
Yeah, it wasn't. I'm never surprised anymore with news being leaked or kind of getting out. I think there's an assumption in this day and age where we have more things internally that we feel like we need to check than those who are reporting on it. So if they get news and they feel comfortable with it and it's something that they've sourced and are willing to report, they can go ahead and do that. Like with this, we could put this news out really at any given time, but we have those internal considerations that we have to be aware of. So at this point, a leak of that nature isn't really surprising. The interesting part was I woke up that morning, got myself ready to go, and was headed down to campus for game day. And I was thinking, okay, well, we'll talk a little bit today with that group, and we'll make sure we get everything finalized with the plan being for Monday. And as I was driving to campus, I spoke with my counterpart in communications on campus, Chris Sigurdsson, and that's when the conversation started about getting the announcement finalized and ready to go for sometime early that afternoon. So that changed. I actually didn't see game day here. I didn't see it on TV and didn't see it in person as I was working on the final, the finishing touches on the announcement press release and making sure our elements and graphics were together and that everybody was on the same page. So, Saturday was a real whirlwind, but it was a controlled whirlwind and one that we were prepared for.
Interesting. A controlled whirlwind. That's a good spin by a communications guy. I like that.
Well, right. I mean, those things happen, but when you expect that the news is going to be broken by someone somewhere at some point, that feeling of, oh no, kind of goes away, because I had the release built Friday afternoon, and it was just going through checks and balances at that point. So it's always nice when something like that comes up for a communications person, because it limits the amount of times something can be edited. We need to get it done. We need to get it finalized. We need to make sure that the principals have reviewed it and are okay with it. And that happens a lot quicker when you have a deadline that's moved up by a day and a half or 2 days. So, yeah, I mean, it was wow, okay, here we go. But having all the elements in hand and having prepared over the previous 6 weeks, you felt comfortable with where we were.
And that's today's One Question, brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996. One Question is designed to give D1 Ticker subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences. One Question is brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996.